I did not see in these documents the allocation of cost within the delta, the benefit, for example, benefit. Now, it may be that you've got them and I just missed them, and we don't have to go through them now. But it would be very helpful to see if you have made a tentative or preliminary or suggested allocation, particularly for the areas within which we have a statutory duty to recommend flood investment strategies to the state of California.
We did. And out of two of the Delta regions, Delta North, we're looking 1.7.
Which is this part of?
It's in the plan. Chapter 4.
Which page?
Chapter 4. I opened right to it. Sorry, Chapter 3. We get to it on page 3-31.
31. Okay.
So I guess it's easier for me to read it straight out of
this. This is table 3.5.
Yes. So in 3.5, Delta North is $1.7 to $2 billion over the expected life of the system-wide investment approach. Investments. And
the system improvements is, in fact, the department's preferred approach.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that's where all the cost numbers are coming from, and then the Delta South region is coming in around $500 million. That's the $580 million to $740 million. And then keep in mind that, as I mentioned earlier, the Lower Sacramento, which is by far the most expensive region sitting in our initial plan, that $5.4 to $6.5 billion. A lot of that includes the land purchases associated with easements for the Yellow Bypass.
Then let me ask you a question. This is not a chart of the assignment of the total cost of $6.5 billion for the Delta.
Correct. This is not binding.
No,
so it's not
I
binding
understand
divisions,
that.
and it doesn't talk about all of the department's investments in the Delta.
Here's what I'm interested in. For the statutory Delta, whether the territory overlaps with Central Valley floodplain or does not, some significant areas do. Have you assigned specific costs to those areas of the recommended plan so that we could pull out and say, within the Central Valley floodplain, these areas receive what percent of benefit from the $6.5 billion of spending?
We haven't pulled that information out.
Is it possible to do that? And you understand what we're trying to do is we've been ordered to do levy standards, we've been ordered to do investment strategy, and everyone, generally speaking, asserts that the benefit of every project is totally to the benefit of someone else who should pay for it, but it's really important that it be done because they also get benefit. Yeah, I mean, you know the process. And I'd be very interested in that information. I think all of us would.
So you're talking about flood damage, that kind of benefits for Delta?
Look, all I want to know is if we have to recommend investment strategies, that will be some evaluation of ultimately what a local share should be, a state share should be, a federal share should be. As you begin to examine the implications of a project, a levee repair on this island, you build in cost assumptions and benefit assumptions in your proposal. Can you extract that information for the island and let us know what it is? You operate dams to minimize flood control upstream differently. To what extent is I'm just making this up, $500 million you spend on reauthorization or the protection that comes from it, derivative to a particular island?
Right, okay. In the cost appendices where we developed that information, we drew rough lines on the map, because if you get it right here and wrong there, it kind of averages out. It's literally what happens when you're at this recon level. And based on that, we applied unit costs that were reasonable for the different regions within the Central Valley Flood Protection Planning area. And so we could go back, but we could go back and look at what the lines on the map were in the Delta.
How about the first thing is, can you give us the regions by can you give us the information by the regions that you used as part of this structure? Eric, I'm not saying that's right, and we're not going to pursue it here, but maybe you and Mr. Nickel could work out some way to get the information so that as we begin to do an evaluation, and the fifth draft Delta plan suggests a kind of a start of an island-by-island evaluation, we at least have whatever information is available, understanding it's preliminary, tentative, generalized, whatever words you used, but it's better than speeches.
Sure. We will definitely work with the Stewardship Council staff to get as much detailed information that was used in this plan, as well as the continued information that we're developing at the regional planning level.
Good. Don.
Just as you're asking for information, though, and for a breakdown of it, as I heard you say, just as you were kind of in your presentation before Chair Eisenberg's questions, that the $6.5 billion assigned to the Lower Sacramento, that a large part of that was actually buying easements or floodway clearances. Some of that actually being in the Delta, though. When you talk about the Yolo bypass,
Right.
And that if you're looking at then on your chart there on 331, Delta North, Delta South, that I assume some of that is likewise floodway areas, assignments of those areas, but a lot of it's attributable to what Phil was asking, I guess, would be improvements to levees about the waterways. Is that correct? There's a breakdown in there.
There's a breakdown in there, and just looking at it, you can see when we start getting into billions, we're talking about really easements, and those are the land purchases that are driving those.
So the $2 billion that would be assigned to the Delta North, that's more of easement related than it is levee improvement?
There are levee improvements associated with that because you have to buy the land and then you set back the levee, build it up to the new height. But they're both in there. But the land is the real driver on the costs. The reason I'm pointing that out there, and you can kind of conceptually see it, look at the middle San Joaquin where we have a really small state plan of flood control footprint, and we're not talking about bypass improvements there. They're coming in on the order of $200 million. Whereas when you compare that to Delta North, it's an order of magnitude higher as far as the investment. So we're literally, we have a large footprint that we're touching between the regions, and we're actually extending not just lengthwise out, but in space.
The other thing that occurred to me, just as a question being asked, is that then part of that, though, either Delta North or potentially Delta South, I mean, you also, in addition to flood improvements or flood protection, you've got the conveyance piece of this that currently exists. I mean, when you've got through Delta conveyance and
how does that factor in? This is only a flood risk reduction project. Flooding
can impact your ability to convey water.
It can. Typically during a flood event, you have high solids. The turbidity increases. So if you look at the State Water Project and Center Valley Project operations, they actually shut down their operations during flood events due to water quality concerns.
But if you have islands that flood, for example, we talk about risk reduction, and then you get salinity entry. I mean, all
Yep.
the things that are different components. It may not be in your focus. I'm just curious is that you get numbers that may go up or down depending upon the inputs, obviously. But But that relates to risk reduction. I mean, that's the whole thing about water supply reliability that we get into in the co-equal goals is that, if certain areas were to fail, and whether in a high water event or in some other situation, that one, you get the risk and the impacts to those who are immediately affected, but then, how it impacts upon the system of conveyance and habitat potentially as well. So, but that didn't get all folded in?
Different program. So that's the BDCP that would consider that, as well as the project, the reliability associated with any project, be it the Central Valley Project, State Water Project, East Bay Mud or Contra Costa's operations, City of Tracy, any of the local ag communities that are actually diverting water on there. They all have a stake in that game. But that economic analysis was not a part of this.
So
and the reason being is
to your plan, Mike. So how does it connect to your plan then? Tell me that then.
Sure. So when we move from the recon down to the feasibility, we're also under the directive to achieve, back on the bubble charts, we'll go to this one here, those contributes to supporting goals, which is code word for, well, let's not just use the flood money, let's use some flood money and get a little environmental money and get some water supply money and get a better project out there. And so as you move from multiple feasibilities, a habitat plan, a water supply reliability conveyance plan, and a flood plan, you need to have dialogues with those studies because there were different assumptions that were made. So where we talked about the flood fights assumptions, those are things the habitat community isn't going to be talking about because they're talking about frequent floodplain inundation or the FAF, the frequency of activated floodplains. And when they do that, they're looking at every other year or every fourth year, what is the water surface profile? Where when we're talking about a flood risk reduction, we're looking at a 10-year return period. What happens 1 out of 10 years? What's the 10% chance of happening? All the way up to that 500-year event, that 0.2, I think it is. Yeah, it's the 0.2% chance of flood. And as we're going through and doing that, we're talking about really different behaviors of the system in and of itself. That's the reason why we have bypasses that are so effective in the Central Valley. But where we would move into that next level, those feasibility studies, we'd begin to take our more defined lines on the map, line them up with those others. So the area where you're going to see this happen is between the system-wide improvements that we're talking about, the bypass studies for the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, lining up with the bypass expansions that BDCP is interested in, where BDCP is interested in actually getting some habitat out there. The Central Valley Flood Protection Plan is literally interested in getting the water into the bypasses to literally get it away from the areas that are at risk.
Okay. Just one final thing, Mike. And again, your expertise and knowledge in this is incredible. As I've the last couple hours, as you filled the questions and laid this out, it's very impressive. I just wanted to kind of to sum up to what you said, and I mean this is a system-wide plan, and again maybe as a subset of that, then the levies are looked at as a system, right, versus individually. So I mean whether it's for purposes here of flood protection, but it really is an emphasis on a system-wide approach, a system-wide consideration. Obviously, the integral pieces of that, many different pieces of it, but that it is a system.
Correct. Yeah, I mean that's the if we could walk away with one word, system-wide benefits. I guess that's 2 or 3 depending on how you're counting.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
3.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Okay, Mr. Nickel, we're going to have you start off right after we come back from lunch. 3 people wish to talk on this issue. Mr. Zuckerman from the Central Delta Water. No? Going to pass. So that'll be on the next section? Okay. Mr. Zlotnick? No. Going to pass on the next section. Mr. Ingram from the Conservancy. Next section. Okay. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break for lunch. We're going to come back. We're going to start with Mr. Nichols' report on the maps we've just received and posted from the Department of Water Resources related to these kinds of questions. That will take Mr. Nichols how much time? 10 minutes at the most? 10 minutes at the most. Then we're going to start immediately with the Delta Protection Commission. It is 12:35. We will start again at 1:20. 1:20, ma'am. Thank you very much.